JJ, congratulations. Episode number 1000. Well done, man.
Thank you. Yeah. As you guys know, a lot of the episodes are like shorter in length, right? Because that's kind of what the Late Round podcast is all about and what I've been doing for years. But I asked ChatGPT to estimate the number of hours that all of these episodes were. So, not working on the podcast, but how long in duration these episodes were. And that includes Becoming Bestball Bro. That includes Late Round Perspectives. Do you have any guesses on how many hours the Late Round podcast feed basically has in podcast content right now?
Ooh, that's a good one. It's shorter for me. I'm a 1.75x bro. But if we're talking 1x, I don't know, 3 weeks?
3 weeks? 3 weeks? Okay, so I asked ChatGPT. It's 46 freaking days. It's 46 days of podcast content that could almost get you to the start of the NFL season. I'm JJ, and last year I tried my hardest to become a best ball bro. I drafted over 500 teams, I talked to some of the most successful best ball players in existence, and I admittedly had mixed results. So this year, I'm going to chase that title once again. My plan is to max enter DraftKings Millionaire Maker, and I'm going to document all of it while talking to the brightest best ball minds on the planet. Last year, I didn't quite get there, but this year, this is going to be the year where I officially become a best ball bro. This episode is sponsored by DraftKings. There's no better way to lock in your fantasy dominance early than with Best Ball on DraftKings, where you draft once and ride your roster all season long. And right now, DraftKings is giving all customers a can't-miss offer. Draft one, get one. Enter a lineup in the $15 million Best Ball contest for just $20, and you'll score another Best Ball ticket to play free for a share of that $15 million, giving you a second shot to win big. It's easy. Just draft your dream team once, no weekly management required, and let your top scorers automatically start each week. Across the whole season, every breakout star, every clutch play, every touchdown will count towards your quest for a share of $15 million. I'm drafting over there all the time. It's an absolute blast. So download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app now to draft your $20 Best Ball lineup to play for a share of $15 million and get a second ticket to play free for a share of that $15 million. That's 2 chances to win big without ever setting your lineup again. Draft one, get one, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. 1 per customer. Enter the Best Ball $15 million headliner contest by 9/4/25 to get 1 bonus entry. $20 entry fee required. Reward expires in 30 days. See terms at DraftKings.com/NFL-best-ball. Sponsored by DK. Now back to the show. Welcome into another episode of Becoming a Best Ball Bro. I'm JJ Zacharyson, joined as always by Rich Ryan. Rich, what's going on, man?
JJ, I am fantastic. We're recording this on a Tuesday. I got my Garrett Wilson one-handed cat shirt on because he signed his extension yesterday on Monday. And just before we hopped on to record, Sauce Gardner signed his extension as well. It's joint press conference season in Florham Park, New Jersey. 2 guys that are great dudes from all accounts. I have a birdie in the building, and from all accounts, these are 2 great dudes, great young players, guys that I'm excited for my 4-year-old to get older and watch play for the New York Jets. So very excited.
I'd be excited about 2 overrated players too. It's fine. I understand it's tough as a Jets fan. I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. Although Sauce wasn't as strong last year, to be fair. But definitely. I think that they can turn things around a bit with a new coaching staff there.
Well, what's scary about Sauce is Sauce definitely had a down year last year. And still, if you look at any peripheral metric when it comes to completion percentage, target percentage in the offense, he was still like a top 10 dude at the position. Yeah. So even in a down year, and he's never had the chance to play traveling corner, which we would think under Aaron Glenn's system, a little more aggressive. He would have the chance to play a little more man and get those giant alien arms onto somebody and make some plays.
Yeah, no, I'm happy and excited for Jets fans. They're both good players, obviously. Let's hope that Garrett Wilson can get something going this year with Justin Fields under center. I got a fun guest today. We're not going to get to that just yet, but I have a fun guest today. I got to talk to David Kitchen, COO of Late Round Fantasy Football, someone that you guys have heard me chat with on the Late Round Fantasy Football show on the YouTube channel quite a bit. But first, I want to talk about some things that have been going on with me in the best ball streets, drafting on DraftKings. There's two main buckets I want to talk through today. Okay. The first one is 3 tight end builds. Okay. I think 3 tight end builds are optimal when you're drafting 3 late round tight ends, especially, if Tucker Kraft is your tight end 1 and then Brenton Strange is your tight end 2, and then you kind of throw a dart at tight end 3. But I've had a hard time and I've struggled a little bit. I wonder what you've been doing, where a lot of these best ball bros have talked about 3 tight end builds being optimal, even if at times you drafted an elite tight end. And my issue I have with this is that if you draft Trey McBride, if you draft Brock Bowers, if you draft even George Kittle, part of the allure in doing that, in my opinion, is the fact that you're able to capture the same amount of tight end production, or more tight end production, hopefully, with just one spot as opposed to using multiple spots, right? So you can get 2 tight ends and still be okay. I'm still getting 3 tight end builds late, but I'm trying, when I get McBride and Bowers and such, like, I don't want to feel the need that I need to get 3 tight ends. You think that's the wrong approach?
So my gut is with you in that we've talked about it for 2 years now. Based on the early round drafts picks that we make, those selections, those are bets that we are making, that they are not only going to have an impact on our point output for the entire season, getting us into the playoffs, but in these crucial playoff rounds and in these finales, that those bets that we're making are going to be the ones that get us home. So when we invest the capital necessary to get a Bowers or a McBride, I do agree that on the surface, it makes it difficult to then take one of our 20 draft positions and use it on another tight end. That being said, because we have those extra picks, I almost feel like it's somewhat wasteful to not have a sense of security by having a third player in that room who can help us along the way. And what I've been doing in these spots is that third tight end, I almost always try to find somebody that is going to stack with one of my quarterbacks. So at least, even though it might be a later tight end and somebody that I'm not betting on individually to have an impact, it at least correlates with a quarterback that I have or a game that I have already rostered on my team.
Yeah, my thing is, like, if I'm going to get, let's say I get Trey McBride and then I get, I don't know, Brenton Strange, I think is probably like the cutoff where you could go either way with a third tight end, right? Because if I'm going to draft a tight end before Brenton Strange, that's going to be like a Tucker Kraft. And to me, Trey McBride and Tucker Kraft, you don't need another tight end, right? But I think that the attractiveness of going McBride or Bowers in these scenarios and still going 3 tight end would be getting 2 tight ends in the final 3 rounds of your draft, and that being it, and not worrying about tight end in between and then stacking that way. So I think that's when I'm going 3 tight end, but I also don't want to force it. I'm fine with getting 2 tight ends, even though 3 tight ends are probably generally optimal. The one thing I do want to talk about, though, today in more detail is not falling behind at quarterback. I think anyone who drafts on DraftKings notices this more and more as they draft more and more. And we've been talking about this for weeks on this show. But I want to give you a real life example so people can really wrap their heads around what's going on at quarterback over on DK. Okay. So I was in a draft yesterday. I had the 103. I took Justin Jefferson first overall in that draft, or first, with my first round pick in that draft. Here's how my first 10 rounds went. Okay. Justin Jefferson, Jonathan Taylor, Tyreek Hill, Amarian Hampton, Jalen Waddle, because I wanted to pair him with Tyreek Hill, Chris Godwin as a bring back for that Miami game, Jacoby Myers, Jordan Mason, Jalen Warren, and JJ McCarthy. So for the first 10 rounds, I felt pretty decent. Like, not like the most amazing team in the world, but, you had some correlation with the pass catchers. You had a bring back situation with Miami, Tampa Bay. You had a Minnesota stack with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Mason, and JJ McCarthy. And then I was at the 1103. And in the 11th round, I sat there and I said, look, I could get Tua right now and draft him, 15 picks ahead of ADP, something along those lines, 15 to 20 picks ahead of ADP. Or I could wait for it to come back to me and hope that Tua falls 3 picks after ADP. Okay. Because his ADP was 139, I believe, and I was at 142, if I remember correctly. And so I decided to pass on Tua. And I took Jaden Higgins, because what Jaden Higgins did for my team is, number one, paired him up with Amari and Hampton for week 17, but also opened up an opportunity for another stack of CJ Stroud, going with CJ Stroud and Jaden Higgins. Obviously I wanted Tua because I had Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Stroud goes mid-round 12, which I think objectively is too early for him, but whatever. He goes mid-round 12. Tua goes unstacked 1 pick before me. Okay. Very tilting. Only because it was 1 pick. I would have rather Tua went 3 picks after I decided not to take him. Right now, I'm in a situation then where I'm in round 12, the end of round 12, and I only have JJ McCarthy. So if I pass on a quarterback, I run a serious risk of not having 3 starters on my team. And I know with a build where JJ McCarthy is my QB1, I'm going to need 3 starters, right? And most builds I'm taking 3 quarterbacks, but let alone when my first quarterback is being taken, in the 10th round, in the late 10th round. So what I ended up doing, I forced, getting Bryce Young, because I knew there were stackable pieces after that, which is part of the reason why I have a lot of Bryce Young right now, is because he's just the desperation emergency to kind of quarterback in that situation. And then I took Geno Smith in the very next round ahead of ADP because I had Jacoby Myers, right? But I look at that board, okay? And I look at it after the fact. I think in the moment, of course, I would have rather had Tua than Jaden Higgins to complete that stack. But I think in the moment, the decisions I made were not necessarily the wrong decisions to make, right? But I look at the board in hindsight, and Justin Herbert basically went around before Bryce Young did, before I took Bryce Young. But I don't even think my Bryce Young pick was a bad pick. I think I had to do that based on how the market is reacting to these quarterbacks. Jordan Love went 11 picks before Bryce Young. I like Bryce Young a lot. He's a late round dart throw, spoiler alert, in the late round draft guide. But Jordan Love, I think, is objectively the better fantasy asset, right? Only 11 picks before. The value of those players are just so much value. It was so much better than the value that I got with Bryce Young. And I think this is, the more that I've thought about this, and I feel like we've brought this up so often on the show, but haven't had a conclusion or cohesive thought, totally cohesive thought to it all. And the more that I think about this, the more I think the reason, and I probably know the reason that these quarterbacks feel like their ADPs are rising, is because when we're forced to reach for these quarterbacks, their ADPs rise. And when their ADPs rise, even in a scenario where you don't need to reach for a quarterback, you're just going to draft that quarterback at ADP, right?
Oh, I have pick 127. This quarterback is getting taken at 125. I should just take this guy. That's what these people are doing.
Exactly. And so we're in this vicious cycle. And again, this has been in our minds for a while now, but we haven't really fully articulated it, right? We haven't just thrown it out there in this way. And I really wanted to throw it out there in this way. But this is why at the end of the day, we're seeing what we're seeing with some of these QB2s in some drafts. And you'll see it fluctuate. Some drafts, CJ Stroud will fall a little bit, or Trevor Lawrence will fall a little bit. And if you're lucky enough to have that, or, need that player for a stack to complete a stack, and he just falls into your lap, that's it's a rarity these days. It probably happens 1 every 15 drafts, but that's great if that ends up happening. But this is why I think if you can get one of those round 9, round 10 quarterbacks in best ball at the moment, that tier of maybe Bo Nix to, let's say, Dak, something along those lines, those types of players, and you can pair them immediately with another one, you have the flexibility then to really push the market and push the draft board later, where, if someone doesn't want to get Cam Ward, if someone doesn't want to get Aaron Rodgers, there's your QB3 that you can push later. And in a worst case scenario, you can still have 2 quarterbacks and be okay. If you have Dak Prescott, I'm not looking at bye weeks or anything right now, but if you have Kyler and Dak Prescott, you're okay with 2 quarterbacks. You don't necessarily absolutely need 3 quarterbacks. So then I was thinking, okay, let's say that you get into round 9 and you don't have stackable players for a certain quarterback in that range. And I think what I need to do is just force it a little bit more, even though I'm overexposed to these guys to begin with, at least versus expectation. But like, I think forcing it a little bit more with Kyler and with Justin Fields, because those two, Kyler, you can get Michael Wilson late. Justin Fields, you have the mobility, obviously, Mason Taylor, and then you have even Reynolds if you want to go super late, with just a random player in round 20 that's not getting drafted in every single millie right now. It's difficult to do it with Brock Purdy because all of his pass catchers go before Brock Purdy gets drafted. It's difficult to do it with Caleb Williams. Maybe not, though, if Colston Loveland, you could still go that route. So I don't want to totally throw that out. And it's almost impossible to do it with Dak Prescott because, you could technically get Jake Ferguson and pair him with Jaden Blue maybe, but you're really asking for like a very specific outcome in that case, in my opinion. And then there's some other guys, later that you can do it with, of course. But I'm thinking about that area of the draft where you're maximizing value in terms of points per game with those players because the guys who should be going way later are now going not way later. And so what that does is it makes the round 9 and 10 guys more valuable because you're getting a better deal on them versus the deal you're getting on a mid to low end QB2, right? And so who are the guys that we can really focus on that we can stack later if we don't have that stack? Kyler and Justin Fields, I think, are the two that we should probably, I'm just trying to narrow my exposure down a little bit more, but I think we should be overexposed to those guys just based on this alone and based on these market dynamics alone. Do you think that this is all logical?
Yes. I think at some point you need to just pull the ripcord at times and take a quarterback before ADP determines, right? We almost have to think of these quarterbacks as like ADP round ranges as opposed to ADP the specific draft slot position. Because when we start to do that, we put ourselves in positions where, I'm taking this guy half round early or 3/4 of a round early, and you feel kind of icky about doing that. But to draft the most optimal team based on the players you've selected before that point, sometimes you just got to do that and just take the quarterback and fill in your roster and make it as optimal as possible. One of the later guys, you brought up a couple great mid-round quarterbacks there. One of the later guys that has just been a great ripcord for me is Daniel Jones. This morning, had an absolute catastrophe at the quarterback position. I actually was able to pull the ripcord and I built a Bayshall Tootin, Daniel Jones, AD Mitchell game stack within the last couple rounds. Pull the ripcord, get it in there, get some value. Maybe not the greatest names when you come to Jones and AD Mitchell, but they are correlated. They have upside. So if you are going to risk it, if you are going to play like the max leverage and wait, you have to be able to pull the ripcord and get these creative stacks later. But at the end of the day, you just don't be so married to ADP in some of these spots at quarterback. It needs to be treated as a separate position completely.
This is why when I looked at my exposure and I realized I have a ton of Bo Nix right now. And I think this is why I have a lot of Bo Nix. Just like subconsciously, he will get drafted at ADP pretty frequently because people aren't necessarily reaching for Nix because they don't need to reach for Nix at that time because there's a lot of other quarterbacks still available. So they're like, oh yeah, I don't necessarily need to force the issue unless I have Cortland Sutton or something like that. But we know that people still aren't drafting based on correlation anyway, and they're not drafting based on that to begin with. So I've been getting Bo Nix naked. Sometimes I'll get Evan Ingram, but I don't even need Evan Ingram because you can get Marvin Mims, you can get Devon Vele, you can get all these random wide receiver pieces while Nix himself and J.K. Dobbins is a running back, while Nix himself has mobility and rushing upside where he could have standalone upside with a multiple rushing touchdown game. That to me is really interesting. So I'm getting Nix even I'm fine getting him naked for sure and drafting him, and he'll fall past ADP. And then when he does fall past ADP, you're getting a massive value because the other quarterbacks are going to be going higher than they probably should.
And it's only going to get worse. We're at the start or the middle of July now. You've got the great offer of draft one, get one from DraftKings right now. I was in a group chat with some of my buddies from Elon. Shout out Elon. Yesterday, they got some DraftKings offers to draft Bestball this week as well. So these offers are only going to go out. More casual players are only going to start getting interested into football now and headed into August and closer to the season. So this quarterback fixation, I fear, will only get more intense the closer we get to kickoff.
Yeah. My only thing with that is I wonder, and I don't have the answer to this. I'm just thinking out loud. I wonder if when more casual players come in and enter the fold, if they're going to draft that upper tier of quarterbacks higher. I'm not even talking about the elite tier, but just the next guys, right? If they're going to, because if all those guys start to get boosted up more, then it's actually going to make then finally the QB2s feel a little bit more easier and giving us a decent appetite to draft them, because of that as well. But like, I also, what's interesting to me is that like Jackson Dart, for instance, is not moving that much in ADP, right? While all of, not to say that he's going to be a stud or that he's going to start all season, but if you get two really solid quarterbacks and you feel really good about them, and you can wait and quite literally throw the dart at Dart and get him, in it, like far, far past where the other guys are going, simply because those other guys have that season-long allure and that season-long upside. But that to me is a perfect QB3 situation because obviously like he's probably going to be starting during the most important part of the fantasy season, which is the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, I think the guys that have the stink on them, whether it be the organization that they're in or they're coming off a bad season, like Jordan Love. Jordan Love has been slipping this entire summer-long draft process because he had a less than stellar season last year based on everybody's hype going into last year, all these weapons, great coaching staff. And yeah, Jackson Dart down 17 picks since we started doing this in May. Like, is the casual dude who gets this DK offer going to go in there, march in there, and put Jackson Dart on his team? I'm not too sure.
I do think that Dart is likely. Like, if you're going to look at the Giants quarterbacks, would you not say that Jackson Dart is the most likely to be starting during the fantasy playoffs this year?
Oh, 100%. Like, the only scenario with which I'm not betting on Jackson Dart playing the most meaningful snaps for us in these contests is in some scenario where Daboll's trying to protect his job. The Giants have somehow gotten out to a playoff contention spot where they're battling
like
for the 7th seed
start or something like that.
Yeah, some miraculous start. Other than that, if this goes as expected based on their Vegas win total and they struggle a little bit and it seems like Daboll's got some buy-in from ownership that they get to groom Jackson Dart, it seems most logical that Dart will be playing these snaps, yes.
Yeah, so I'm trying to get a little bit more of him whenever I do get two of those like pretty good, solid core. If you get a round 10 and a round 11 quarterback, I feel like going with Dart as your QB3 is actually pretty sharp given the value that you're getting out of that with the QB2s rising the way they are in ADP.
It gets super cliffy after that, right? If we were talking Flacco, Russell Wilson, Shadur Sanders, Jalen Milroe,
I'm hoping
not
we
liking
get
any of that.
Yeah. I'm hoping we get some clarity of QB2 in Cleveland if we assume Flacco starts the season, and then we can say, okay, Shador is going to be the one that's starting, towards the end of the year, and we can throw those like 19th, 20th.
I want to bet on Shador. Right? Like,
it's hard though.
Rookie quarterback, for all the things that have been said about him, like he's a pretty good thrower of the ball, very accurate. Colorado didn't have a good offensive line, so he had to perform in chaos a lot last year. So yeah, it's the type of last round quarterback that I want in these things. But like you said, if there's no clarity as to who's the QB2, it's kind of too dangerous to make that pick right now.
Yeah. All right. So there's the rant about the quarterback landscape right now. Now that we're all on the same page, let's move on to this interview. David Kitchen, like I said, he's a former DraftKings pro and the current COO of this little company called Late Round Fantasy Football. We talked about Max entering contests, changes that he's seen in the best ball streets in the fantasy industry through the years, elite tight ends, the changing quarterback landscape. So a similar discussion to what we just talked about. So much more. It was a great conversation, a lot of fun. So without further ado, here is that interview with David Kitchen. All right, Kitchen, you were once a DraftKings pro, and you've been around the fantasy football streets for over a decade now. It's been a minute. So I got to ask you, what do you think's changed the most with the way that people just generally draft, and what makes drafting easier or more difficult these days?
Yeah, JJ, thanks for bringing up the DraftKings Pro days. That was like during the beginning of daily fantasy, like the peak of DFS. And I think we're starting to get to that point in best ball as well, where it's becoming more and more mainstream. People are rolling out content earlier and earlier. Sites are rolling out their contest earlier and earlier. So I think as far as the drafting goes, we still haven't reached the peak for what best ball is. I think it's going to be like mainstream. And so if you're asking like the biggest ways that people are drafting now, definitely stacks. On DraftKings, definitely taking quarterbacks earlier. And you're like, no, because you've been drafting with this mindset of you want to get these quarterbacks later. And you want to just yell at the chat that they're doing it wrong. But when everybody's doing it, you have to also kind of adapt and participate. So I guess I would say is like the different way people are drafting is that game theory is much more involved than it was back in the old days, back in the MFL 10 days. Then it was just draft the best guys you could and hope those guys get you the most points possible at the end of the day.
I know I'm becoming a best ball bro, but I don't think people realize that like I was playing not to the volume that I'm playing now, like on DraftKings and so on, but like MFL 10s were a thing. And look, this is also back when I was younger and didn't have the same disposable income and stuff. Right. Like this is like very, very early on in the fantasy football, industry days, at least compared to where things are now. And I thinking back on that, I feel like it was just people were just they had no true strategy when they were drafting those teams.
But it was so fun. And that was the whole point. Yeah. I remember in our like DK Pros best ball or in our DK Pros chat, Adam Levitan, and me were talking about we should all start a best ball site. And then we got looking into the, all the regulations but that was the whole point is up until then you had to participate in a mock draft to get your beak wet in like June or July. Now people are drafting before the NFL draft has even taken place, and they are trying to account for whatever they can to get the largest like EV over the playing field. And now you have tools. And that has also followed the DFS side of things, where when DFS first came out, people didn't really have projections to look at. They were drafting or putting their teams together with vibes and all hand built. Mm-hmm. Now you have some optimizers that are making it easy to enter 150 teams or to see like the sims. And so you're seeing more advanced tools come into this space, especially these large format fields, these millionaire maker fields that people are using. And yet people are still winning a millionaire maker with one bullet, just like they did back in the old days. So I think we're seeing just the best ball scene kind of imitate the career arc that DFS has, except I think best ball just continue going bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I do too, because I think the difference is pretty obvious in that like the economy of best ball and like the strategy and like the thinking around best ball compares so much more similarly to season long than DFS. Because like I literally, and I've been open about this, I stopped playing DFS a few years ago.
Yeah.
Because it's a different beast to play, right? It's a different research oriented things. Like it's harder when that's not your focus, and it wasn't my focus, right? So I was like, okay, well, I'm not putting the time into this, so it's more difficult for me to go do this. Not to say that you shouldn't play DFS. I think that you should still play DFS, but I just
thanks for giving me permission to play DFS.
Yeah, no, I don't mean you. I mean listeners out there.
Yeah.
But I do agree that like there's just more of a one-to-one relationship with season long, obviously, with best ball, and everyone in the fantasy space knows what season long is. That's the top of the funnel. Like that's where people are coming in and getting introduced to fantasy football. So it's naturally kind of like a next iteration to get to best ball. MFL 10s, by the way, they were only 12-team leagues too, right? There were no tournaments.
There were no tournaments. Everything was $10. So that's when we again. Back in, I remember RT Sports and some of these sites that you would try to get like a draft slot that night.
Yeah.
and or like the next day. And so you would plan the whole day trying to get into this draft the following night that was online. Otherwise, you had to organize something with your friends. Yeah. And then MFL 10's kind of normalized being able to get in a draft, hey, putting a link out there and be like, all right, who wants to get in this draft? And then it's starting and immediately getting that rush of drafting, which is the best part of fantasy football. And I think it also, we had to do mock drafts. Those were the absolute worst because you had people that would just get in and get out and not take it seriously. It wasn't mimicking anything.
Yeah.
And so I think that, if you have a few bucks to spend, you just enter however many drafts you want or your budget allows, and you'll immediately be more prepared for your season-long team than you would if you didn't.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned having like a single bullet in a contest, I'm obviously documenting my journey in max entering the Millie. And that's 150 entries, and I'm at 70 right now. Am I ahead of you now? Are you at 70?
I'm at 75.
Okay,
so but you are catching up.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, like, do you think that it's uber important to be able to max enter a contest like this to have a chance to win a contest like this? I think this is the argument that we've heard for years and years and years in the DFS space, is that you're at a huge advantage if you're able to max enter a tournament versus just, and that's why more and more single entry stuff has come out and whatnot. But you still see some single entry contests on DraftKings, but like with the Millie in particular, this like big flagship type contest, do you think that people are at some sort of disadvantage by only having 5 lineups versus the 150?
Yeah. And this is kind of mimics for me the DFS days as well, because back in the day you were max entering things, and now I'm just not rich enough to be max entering a millionaire, like all these millionaire and high profile contests that they have. However, I'll max enter a lot of the single entry, the 3 max, and even like the 20 entry, and that will get me to where I want to be. And then I'll create 1 or 2 tournament teams and make sure I put them in the Millie, because like I call it an emotional hedge. Because if you just imagine the scenario where your tournament team wins the $3 or the $1 league, and then like if I had just put that into the Millie, it would have won. That's tough to come back from. So sure. I think, and this might be contrary to how some people think, I think number one should be like you're playing for entertainment. You're playing so that I guarantee you, even though I play DFS every week during football season, when week 16 and week 17 comes around, it doesn't matter how much money I have in DFS contests, I am glued to those playoff best ball. My teams that have advanced to that next round, that round 15, 16, 17. So that for me is like you're checking the teams, or if your DFS teams aren't doing good during the year, you immediately go to your best ball teams and see like, all right, who are some of the teams that like I did something right back in the day. So if you look at someone put together like a chart, a comparison chart, the 5 of the top 7 contests offered like with their scoring platform were on DraftKings, and you got the pocket passer, which is like the $250 entry. Mm-hmm. Like not many people have $250, but it's a single entry. Right. And then you've got like the $50 3 max, but then you've got the huddle, which is a $5, and you've got the button hook, which is a $3. And those are also in that top 7. And so right there, if you got $32, you have as much of a chance as the next guy.
Yeah.
Or girl. So my thing is like, depending on your budget, play as much as you want to for the entertainment sake. Put a couple in the Millie, and then make sure you're getting those low dollar single entry 3 max, 5 max, because at the end of the day, it's about the entertainment aspect of things.
Yeah, and I think that sites have done a better job of offering lower stakes contests so that you can at least like test and see how good you are at these games versus the market, if you will, even with $10 just to see how you compare to them. And then you can either make the argument, hey, if I had a bigger bankroll, then I would be dominating the millie the way that some other people are, or you'll realize that even when you are max entering a contest, it still doesn't guarantee you anything. At the end of the day, there's still a lot that goes into it and a lot of strategy that goes into it.
They've got like that 20 max $3.
Right.
So for $60, you can play 20 drafts. That's a lot, especially if you do. And I encourage people when they first start, my normie friends is like, just getting a slow draft. Because it's going to take you a week, but then you'll have time in between picks to research. And it's just like a gradual thing where you do that. And by the time your draft comes, and if you've already done 20 drafts, you have a pretty good feel, at least like where people are. Because in our like friends and family leagues, you're going to get people that bring like their magazines, nothing against magazines, but you're going to get
magazines, but yeah.
Yeah, well,
get an electronic draft guide instead.
Some are saying that. Well, I think it's a late. Is it you? Do you offer the? Is it the late round draft guide? Some are saying Some are saying it's the best ever. But yeah, people don't even realize that like new teams that players are on, and so if you've been drafting all summer, you're immediately going to get a leg up on that. So those are some of the things we talk about just translating from, because when we're talking in our little bubble, sometimes we're talking about like the people that are 150 max.
Yeah.
And if you don't have like $3,000 to blow on drafts, which I get, not
many people should or would, that's just the way that it is. Yeah.
And the other thing is when you have 150 bullets in a draft, towards the end, especially, you're going to get weird with some things because you're going to get tired of drafting the same team. So you're not making as many teams as possible. That's why I would not go into a single draft playing like I've got to do this or this format if you're not like maxing it out, or I got to get like even exposure.
Yeah.
I would go with the guys that you like.
Yeah.
Go with the guys that JJ, has talked about or they've talked about in becoming a best ball bro. Cause that's kind of how I do.
Yeah. I think that's really an important thing. And I've seen it a lot this offseason where like analysts on Twitter and such are like, there's too much content, or people on Twitter are like, there's too much content where the analyst is speaking to other analysts.
Yeah.
The analyst is speaking to other, high volume, high stakes players.
You have to even out your entries. Everybody has to get 8% of a player. Yeah.
Right. And I think it's really important that I think hopefully the questions that I've asked on this show on becoming a best ball bro have helped people with game theory and all that kind of stuff. But there's also instances where like, when the guest on the show is talking about like evening out exposure and getting and even in my live streams that I do, where I drafted Derrick Henry the other day because I don't want to walk away with only 2% Derrick Henry this year. Like that's frightening, right? And so but I'm doing that because of the fact that I know I'm going to have a lot of lineups. But if you're only going to have 20, just go for it. Just go with what your research and gut says instead of necessarily evening things out because you're putting more money in and you have the opportunity to really flatten that exposure.
For sure. And that's why you just have to trust yourself and the people that you choose. And at the end of the day, it's not exactly a lottery ticket, right? Because like there is skill, there is correlation, there's stacking, everything involved. But your chances of winning $1 million, you just have to like be real. There's like 800,000 people in this contest to even make it to week 17. That 1,000 team field is going to be like a huge accomplishment in and of itself.
Yes, exactly. All right. So you kind of mentioned what you always refer to as normies when you and I are having discussions and talking about things. And you mentioned your league mates in your home league as normies.
Yeah.
More and more normies, if you will. Yeah. And by the way,
I'm a normie, by the way.
I have to preface with this too. Yeah. When I say normies, when you say normies, they're more normal people, right? Yes. We're the abnormal people. We're the ones that have a problem and talking about this in May and June and stuff like that, right?
Correct.
Yes. But they're getting thrown into the mix here in mid-July. Like this is kind of the time of year where we start to see more people who are more casual with this, joining best ball contests and stuff. Do you think that there's almost this entitlement that sort of started and has occurred with higher stakes / higher volume best ball players where they almost think that they deserve a certain player when they go after a stack. Like, one thing that Pat Kerrane really drove home with me at the beginning of the series this year was to really not tilt when you get sniped with your stack, because that stack, number one, you can be a little bit different with the stack. Like, for instance, I had Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and someone right before me picked Tua, right? And that's super, super frustrating. But at the same time, I would bet that a lot of teams with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are thinking with a stacking mindset, and most of them probably would then have Tua. And so if you don't have Tua, number one, you get Dolphins correlation just naturally, but also, there's instances where they both could have good games, and Tua is still like a mid QB1 and not necessarily like a high end QB1. But I've noticed this in the space a lot, and I think that people will resonate with this idea that, a good example of this is with Joe Burrow this year and the Bengals, and how Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are often, Jamar Chase goes 101, T. Higgins a 2-3 turn guy, Trey McBride as a week 17 stack, will go at that 2-3 turn as well. And then someone might pass on Burrow, who drafted those three players at the 4-5 turn. And then someone takes Burrow mid 5th, which is past his ADP. Yeah. And then people get mad because, I'm the one who's stacking the Bengals. Like, do you think there's a lot of that going on, and it's almost not good for this game in a way?
To some extent. Also, we live in that bubble on, on X, on Bluesky and Reddit, and Discord. So, and it's especially the first time you get, because you feel like you have worked your way into something where you have prepared for something. But the beautiful thing about best ball and drafts, and in particular, is that you don't know how the other 11 are going to feel about this. Like, you don't know what they're thinking, or like if they even have it. So there is some like entitlement, but if someone has entitlement, I just say like brush it off, because like there are going to be times where if you're going by ADP, you're just going to be like, I cannot believe I did not get that stack. Like, that quarterback is supposed to be there for me.
Right.
And I just think you have to realize it's a part of the game. And so I don't think it's ruining the game. I don't think it's tarnishing what we're doing, because there are also, especially on DraftKings, where there's 20 rounds, there are multiple ways to stack teams.
Yeah.
And quarterbacks are going earlier. Yeah. And so I think that was the thing with me that was most frustrating, is feeling like everyone else had to have the same mindset of me, that you can only draft certain quarterbacks later on, and now they're being like pushed up. Yeah. And so I've had to adapt instead of wanting them to adapt to what I think is right.
That's right. I think that's really key, though, because I think the best players are the ones who are adapting to that, as opposed to expecting the room to fall into their lap the way that they want it to fall into their lap, right? Yeah. Like, the best players at the end of the day are going to be the ones who are adjusting to what the market is doing. And we've seen the market change, especially at quarterback. I talked about that with Rich before the intro of this show. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that I think folks should keep in mind. I just, I've had my fair share of tilts, and I've shared those tilts on the show. And
I've seen them. Yeah.
In mostly a joking way. But I do think that you have to, like, when people complain, if you have Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams and someone takes Matthew Stafford in round 6, that's pretty tilting, right? Yeah. Like, that's a frustrating outcome. Yeah. But if you have Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, and you are waiting for Stafford to fall to ADP, and you're waiting for after ADP, because even like the Tua example that I just shared, technically his overall ADP, I think at the time, was 139, and I was at 142. So technically he went a little bit after ADP, a pick or two after ADP. And I can't be like that mad, because I pushed it, right? I could have taken him around earlier and felt fine about it, but I pushed it a little bit to extract more value. And that's the game that we play at the end of the day.
And that's exactly, when you push it and you don't try to get them around early, you're playing with fire on DK, because
it's fun though. That's also part of the fun. Like,
exactly. It's that risk reward. You have to, a few things, like, you have to tell yourself that every lineup tells a story, just like in DFS, like every lineup tells a story. So even if someone snipes your quarterback, it's still possible for your guys to go off, because there are injuries in this game.
Sure.
There's a way for two unstacked players to still be in the championship and at least like advance your team to that week 17 to where hopefully you have a stack or some sort of game stack that can help win the Millie or whatever you're playing for.
Right, exactly. All right, let's talk more about how you're drafting and sort of how you're thinking about things this year. How do you look at drafts and how do you sort of shift your mindset with there being 2 extra rounds on DraftKings compared to like an underdog?
Yeah, and this is like one of the things that when we were talking about before we were drafting on DraftKings, I told you like DraftKings has been my preference to draft. I enjoy drafting. I mean, it could be like a made up site and I would enjoy just the process of drafting. But when it comes to Bestball, I love the 20 rounds. I love playing. I'm already playing DFS like on DraftKings. So I like the bonuses. I like more points for PPR instead of half PPR. And I like that it's a little bit softer. You know, on other sites, people are heavily tethered to ADP. Right. And so it's just like your ADP, what you're supposed to, and you got some sharp people on DraftKings. You just never know sometimes.
And there's falling values often.
So you're having to really adjust like, okay, do I want to stack this guy or do I want to take the guy who's like 30 spots past ADP?
Right.
And that's why I loved when Leona was like, I'll do anything if they drop far enough, on the Becoming a Best Bro episode. Cause that's how I am too. Like I'll blow it all. I'll blow the whole plan up if if a round 9 guy drops to round 11.
Right.
Let's have some fun here. But the 20 rounds every year is different. A couple years ago, I felt like there was just immense value at running back. And so, and a few tight ends. Now, I actually feel like there's a lot of value at wide receiver.
Yeah.
In the 19th and 20th round. And typically that's not the case, but you've got some guys that you've talked about, Vele, A.D. Mitchell. I like Elijah Moore just as a potential just dart throw, but you got 2 extra dart throws basically. And so it allows you to get, for me, you're likely not getting a quarterback like you used to be able to in rounds 19 or 20. So you're getting a tight end 3, or you're getting a wide receiver that has some sort of big upside, big play potential, that spike week potential. Yeah. But the way that I've been drafting this year is the alpha running back situation. I have been pushing running backs further and further down the board.
Yeah. The thing for me is like in those 19-20, it's like you said, you're getting your tight end 3, you're getting a random dart throw wide out, which like A.D. Mitchell, for instance, just given the talent profile and like his open rate score and stuff last year, shouldn't be like he goes undrafted sometimes, or like Devon Vele I mentioned last week, and you mentioned just now, or you're getting a day 3 running back, like a random dart throw,
right?
Day 3 running back that
Taj Brooks,
Krosky Merritt, just some random guys that. Yeah, for those of you listening, Kitchen gave me kind of a grimacing look with the Krosky Merritt stuff. But yeah, I mean, like I'm very open to the range of outcomes of those running backs in that range too, just because day 3 running backs, I haven't found there to be insane correlation with the kind of profiles they emerge with, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the model, the ZAP model is a lot more focused on some of the day 1 and day 2 attributes, because that's what's more important. Day 3 is just kind of, it's not totally out the window, but there's a little bit more a little wider range that we can, a wider net, I guess you could say, that we can accept with those kinds of profiles of those players.
Well, especially with this running back class that we've talked about, and as we get closer to training camp reports, some things will come a little bit more into picture. Right now you've got some teams with 4 or 5 running backs on the roster, so you're just like blindly picking players. You're going to have more players like, okay, this guy is not doing well, he's on the bubble, or he's got an injury.
Yeah.
And so you're going to be able to draft those 19th or 20th round guys with more confidence and probably more, grouping them together with your exposure.
Yeah. Another question I have for you is that as you're entering a draft, are you actively thinking about lineup construction immediately when you get that draft slot, or are you just kind of going off of what the board gives you? And then my question is, because this is what I think ruined me a bit last year, is when I do and kind of take what the board gives me, I feel like my roster construction ends up just being the same. And then when your roster construction is the same, you often get similar players and you're just not necessarily diversifying properly. Like when you're going into a draft, are you saying to yourself, okay, I'll probably go hero RB, and then you mostly go hero RB? Or are you saying at times, okay, you know what? I'm in the 9 spot. If Derrick Henry falls to me, I'm definitely taking Derrick Henry. Or if, I'm definitely going to go with Jonathan Taylor if I'm in the 3 spot, if Jonathan Taylor's there in the second round, because I want to start to build some teams that are more running back heavy.
Yeah. I don't really go into it with any sort of like plan unless something has happened, unless we get like Quinshon Judkins news where I'm like, I'm going to go in this draft and I'm going to get Jerome Ford, in the 18th round. And that's the whole purpose of this draft. Or after listening to your last Becoming a Best Ball episode, it's like, okay, I've got 2% Laporta. I need a Laporta team.
Right.
Whatever it is, I'm going to get a Laporta team. So those are the only times that I do it, is if I see something and I'm like, okay, I need, they're making a good point. I need some exposure to that player. I need a team with that guy. Now, there are some guys I refuse to draft. And if they burn me, they burn me. But, by and large, I'm going into the draft, especially those first 3 or 4 rounds, they'll tell you what you're going to get.
Right.
And, we'll probably talk about this later, but I'm trying to get an elite tight end.
Okay.
I'm trying to get some elite pass catchers, and then maybe one running back. And so a lot of my builds have been like one quarterback, one running back, 5 or 6 wide receivers, and then 1 tight end. And I feel like with that start, that's going to give me a big chance on DraftKings, where people are just like drafting any quarterback in the 12th round that they can. If I can get a semi-decent quarterback and an elite tight end, and then a semi-decent running back, and then a lot of good pass catchers, 0 RB, hopefully is not completely dead.
Yeah, not totally dust. Okay, so you mentioned that you're getting elite tight end. Are you including George Kittle in that? Is it the top 3 for you? And then you mentioned you didn't have that much Laporta, as I do not either. And I've been trying to get a little bit more. My thing with Laporta is I don't think the gap between Laporta to Hawkinson should be as big as it is. And that's my issue with it. And I'm not actively drafting Hawkinson, but yes, number one, I totally agree with reacting to news items before the market can, right? Good example, that was Devon Achane, right? Whenever the Jonnu Smith thing happened, he was going a little bit later than he does now. And if you drafted immediately after that happened, you could still get Achane at his, older ADP.
Yeah, because ADP just kind of creeps down. It's not all of a sudden. Yeah.
Right. And look, I mean, I know that he only rose like 3 or 4 spots, but that's 3 or 4 spots in the early rounds. Like that's a lot.
He's still going. Like sometimes you're getting people drafting him in the first round,
right? Exactly.
Or at the edge of the turn. Like it's right. From a philosophy standpoint, someone going directly into like first round potential is big, because then it's going to push. I've been getting Genty in the second round sometimes, and I think that's probably because of the Achane news.
Yeah, exactly. So I do think it's important to react to news in that way, and maybe even force it a little bit, just because you know that you're going to get an ADP value that way. So I think that's a really good point, to call out there. Let's talk about the quarterback stuff though, because you mentioned how quarterback the market is just kind of wild, and these QB2s keep being pushed up and stuff. Has your quarterback approach changed? Like, are you getting the elite guys, or is it just too difficult if you're getting an elite tight end as frequently as you are?
I'm getting some of the elite guys. And I'm trying to not just go all in. If the rankings say, that we get on Patreon as a late round member, if the rankings have like Josh Allen as the best value, like I still am like, okay, well, I have enough Josh Allen. I need to get some other guys, because I feel good about that. Around pick 90 to 110.
Yeah.
I feel good about some of those guys that have high potential there, but past years, I would have never had 3 quarterbacks by round 12.
Right.
And now it's almost a given.
You almost have to.
Yeah. And so you're taking, this isn't super flex, and you're taking 3 quarterbacks because that's probably the optimal build. And again, it has changed a little bit the style that you're playing. So, I have a lot of Kyler and Caleb Williams and Justin Fields and that. And I'm also trying to take a stance on some of those QB3s. So like, for instance, Cam Ward.
Yeah. Shocker. The Titans fan.
It kills 2 birds with 1 stone, right? Because I'm a Titans fan, and I think that he is undervalued compared to what he could do, and so like I'm trying to take a stance on him as QB3. The same with Tua, because I think that if you're playing with the best possible outcomes, you're playing like telling a story. If you're drafting Reek or Waddle, then you probably need to be telling a story that Tua is also going to have a good season and be injury free, and that's really what's keeping him back from not being like, if you draft Reek or Waddle and he gets hurt, then those Reek and Waddle teams are probably dust.
Yeah. The one thing I do want to say about that tier of like Cam Ward, because I would put it as Bryce Young, Geno Smith, Cam Ward, Aaron Rodgers, right? Like maybe that grouping. I think all 4 of them are kind of decent values because oftentimes they fall back in the draft like multiple rounds versus the CJ Stroud, even Tua to a degree, like that kind of pocket passer group. And whenever I think about range of outcomes, like, would you be that shocked? And maybe you would. And maybe someone listening to this is saying, JJ, you're an idiot. But would you be that shocked if Aaron Rodgers outscored CJ Stroud this year?
No.
Happened last year.
Right. Especially when you've got, DK Metcalf out there, and you got if he's throwing a few Russell Wilson moonballs, then, he could. Right. That's kind of the, we laugh about it, but I had the mantra of live a little on one of the Swolecasts, and then it became a thing, or you just don't know. That was another year's mantra. This year, the game is beatable one, but it all goes back to the fact that sometimes analysts think they have it all figured out. Mm-hmm. This is going to happen. This is what my projections say. This is what my model says. And this is what should happen.
Right.
And when in reality, we know that nothing ever goes by ADP.
Right.
And so your lineup tells a story, and you have to be prepared of like, you just don't know. And so that's why it's okay to take a guy 1 or 2 rounds before ADP.
Yeah. And look, I'm not, for the record, I'm not like saying that I have CJ Stroud ranked behind Aaron Rodgers. I just think it's more of the range of outcomes thinking that people need to do. And if you're getting a 2 or 3 round discount, which at times some of those like back end quarterbacks do fall because the people who are going to take 3 quarterbacks are satisfied. Yeah. And then the people who aren't going to take 3 are also satisfied. And so all of a sudden no one's forcing quarterback, and you can get discounts on Geno and Cam or Aaron Rodgers. And all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, okay. This ended up being a better value than if I would have reached for one of those pocket.
Well, Stroud and Lawrence sometimes fall as well back into the 130s, 140s. Like they're falling to a range where you feel comfortable with. And with both of those 2 guys, you can find players later to stack them with these backdoor stacks. We've talked, I think you and I both have a lot of exposure to Brenton Strange.
Tons,
and so it's because a lot of times it's because you're having to draft Trevor Lawrence. The same thing with Stroud. Now you got Christian Kirk, who we've talked about in the late round fantasy football show on YouTube. There's a plug. But those are some guys that every lineup tells a story. That doesn't mean you have to be right about everything. You just have to be right about that lineup.
Right. You mentioned Sam Laporta. It sounds like you want more exposure with him. Are there any players right now that you've drafted that you wish you had more exposure of?
Yeah. A little bit behind the scenes, like when you and I have meetings, it's like half of like, okay, here's what's coming up. Here's the content schedule. Here's the emails. And the other half is, okay, here's my exposure to these guys. And so this past week, whenever you told me your exposure to TreVeyon Henderson, it sent me into panic mode because I don't have a lot of TreVeyon.
And he's one of my highest rostered running backs.
I know, that's scary because I told you like I'm in that, that one running back in the first kind of 8 or 9 rounds. Yeah. And so TreVeyon falls in this. We've talked about how this year feels like it's the deepest that we've had. Yeah. And so I feel like I love Chris Olave. I love Calvin Ridley. Like those are guys that are going around TreVeyon that I'm going with the upside for the receiving right there. And so whenever you kind of told me, hey, you're an idiot for not having more TreVeyon,
I didn't say that part.
Well, you were thinking it.
So TreVeyon, I mean, to me, in that range where he goes, some of it is just based on the fact that I went really wide receiver heavy to start, and he's my RB1, and I'm starting like a 0 RB type build with him in round 6 because he'll fall sometimes. He'll go. Usually, if it's Ridley versus him, I am going Ridley still, but.
Well, it's Ridley, it's Juwan Jennings, who we have a lot lot.
Yeah.
It's, I don't have a ton of Travis Hunter, but it's Adunze's in there.
Yeah. Adunze's in that group. Yeah, there's good wide receivers. I just have seemed to gravitate towards TreVeyon because I loved him as a prospect and think that his situation is great. I also have 0% Ramondre Stevenson. So that's a pretty lopsided decision.
You're drafting for upside and Stevenson.
Yeah. I have zero Stevenson and 0 Brian Robinson right now.
I don't have very much Brian Robinson either.
Yeah. It's tough for me to click that name in a full PPR platform. The last question then. Who's the player that we're going to need this year?
I think I just mentioned 2, and I'll just go with those guys. I think you need Ridley and or Olave. Guys that if you're telling the story of everything is going right for them, everything is going right for Olave as far as like he has some sort of decent quarterback that can get him the ball and he stays healthy. That's a story you're telling with Chris Olave, that he stays healthy. If you look at his numbers when he's healthy,
right,
they are top 15 numbers.
Right.
And so on a PPR site, when he's a wide receiver 1 in that offense, they're probably not going to be winning a ton of games. So playing from behind, getting lots of garbage points, your garbage time point, you're going to have a chance with him. And then Calvin Ridley, we just talked about with Cam Ward, has an unbelievable deep ball. Guess who had the most air yards last year?
Yeah.
Calvin Ridley. And so I think that you're telling the story there that the Titans have like boots on the ground here. They've got a much better offensive line and they've got a much better quarterback. Nothing against Will Levis, but they got a much better quarterback. Year 2 of a guy who supposedly knows a thing or two about offenses. So I think Ridley takes that next step.
Yeah. I mean, Ridley's splits last year with and without DeAndre Hopkins were actually pretty crazy. And I talked about that I remember on 15 Transactions plenty of times. I had a buy low moment with Ridley. And he really he had some really big weeks last year.
Yeah, he had bad luck with touchdowns too. He just didn't have a ton of touchdowns. Right.
Yeah. I like those call outs quite a bit. And I've always said, I think Chris Olave can be just as good as Garrett Wilson as a player if he's not already been just as good as Garrett Wilson, but he's just not been healthy. And that's been, really difficult for him. But if you look at his per route run numbers, et cetera, he's been unbelievably good. So definitely, I would not be fading Olave at this moment, especially the moment people see him on a field again and he's not, in protocol. That might boost up his ADP a little bit as well. Kitchen, this was great. As always, I talked to you a lot, but talking to you in a more professional capacity, it was a good time.
Yeah, I love it. And how lucky are you to have the 1,000 be this week, DraftKings Bestball be this week, and get one of your best buddies and workmates on the show the same week.
That's right. Let everyone know where they can find you and what you're doing at that great company of late round fantasy football.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, JJ. You can find me on X at David Kitchen X. I had to add the X in there. And then you can also find me in the Discord of the Late Round Patreon community. I'm in there as Soccer Dave, is my old draft DFS name.
Yeah.
And you can also find me sending out some emails on our free email newsletter that we send on Fridays that you subscribe to by going to lateround.com. I help put together all of JJ's analysis into a beautiful document called the Late Round Draft Guide.
That's right.
So those are a few plugs right there.
Yeah. Check it all out, lateround.com. I don't even need to say where to find me and stuff because Kitchen basically already said that on my behalf. But I'm on Twitter at LateRoundQB. Make sure you are subscribed to that newsletter. Make sure you are checking out that draft guide over on lateround.com. Otherwise, everyone, thanks for tuning in.